flying saucers are real.
They've seen the aliens buzzing our missile silos.
The UFO phenomenon, either we like it or not, is already very much part of our reality.
That caused a compass needle to spin and spin.
And that's where the whole seed for the idea of underground bases at Dulce was planted.
They had very large eyes, and, I found their stare extremely difficult to bear.
Hi, everyone. This is Martin Willis, and welcome to Podcast UFO for episode number 36. This is one of two with Sam Maranto. Couple of quick announcements. We are ramping up the show. We're going to have a podcast out every single Friday. And also, Michael Lauk is going to be writing more articles. And we have a brand new forum that just went up 2 days ago. So please check that out. It's right on our website. Before we get into the news, I wanted to ask, we're looking for one or two more people that are sighting witnesses that would like to talk about it. This is for our podcast coming up, and please contact me at martin@podcastufo.com. And now we're ready for the news. How you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you this week?
Good.
All right. This week's news includes thoughts on the Russian meteor explosion, an anomalous undersea skull, and more. As always, you can find links to each story in the show notes. By now, everyone has heard of the meteor that broke up over the Ural Mountains in Russia, injuring thousands. According to a Christian Science Monitor article, though, barely half of the Russian public believes this explanation. Alternate theories about the blast include belief that it was caused by a UFO or an American weapon. Included in the article is an interview with the deputy director of a Russian polling agency who mentions only about 25% of Russians believe in UFOs.
You know, I find that almost hard to believe because there's a lot of activity in Russia.
I actually was shocked by that, too, because I've always heard that Russians are more open.
Yeah, they
to
believe in
things
anything.
Like
now, I say that kind of jokingly, but my girlfriend of many years is Russian, and her parents still live over there. And just about everyone they know, actually in their neighborhood, they had quite a sighting. It was what you would call, I guess I've heard it called before, a probe. It was like a round washing machine-sized anomaly that just hovered over a parking lot for, it was about 6 hours. Can you believe that?
Really?
The thing just sat there for 6 hours, and they all just watched it. They would watch it and come out and watch it, and it'd still be there. It didn't even move, and then all of a sudden it just took off. Only I think one person saw it take off. So UFOs are pretty common in Russia in general. There's a lot of information about that online and some documentaries as well.
Monday, February 25th, saw the launch of 2 nanosatellites containing small telescopes that will be able to study some of the brightest stars as seen from Earth without the interference of the planet's atmosphere. At about 7 kilograms, or 15.5 pounds each, and the size of Nintendo GameCubes, the nanosatellites of the Bright Target Explorer program are not able to take high-resolution images, but can provide valuable support data for the star observation programs.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, I picture my Chihuahua almost weighs that much. Now, did they? I
have had a cat that weighed that much.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could almost toss those things up in the air. Was it just those two things the purpose of a launch?
Actually, no. It was an Indian launch that put up one large satellite and several smaller ones, the smallest two being these 2 nanosatellites, but 7 in all.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
The Ocean X team, the group exploring the Baltic anomaly, has released new footage taken with a remote-controlled submersible that appears to show an elongated skull at the investigation site. The Baltic anomaly, for those not familiar, is a strange circular undersea structure in the waters near Sweden, approximately 195 feet wide and 13 feet high. You may remember it was called the quote-unquote undersea Millennium Falcon in many news reports.
That's right, and that really does look like something. I mean, if it was a natural anomaly, it would really be something. It sure looks like some type of craft. And the skull, actually, you can see the sockets in the eyes, what looks like that. That would be a really strange anomaly if that's what it was. Now, I've tried to get Peter Lindbergh from the Ocean X team on the show. I've contacted him a number of times. I was able to get an email address. No response, but I'd sure like to have him on.
Well, maybe they're at sea. Maybe when they get back.
Yeah. Okay. I'll buy that.
A recently posted YouTube video reportedly taken in England on a cell phone appears to show an unidentified object flying in a thunderstorm. It is suggested it may be gathering or generating lightning. We have a link on the show notes so you can view it for yourself.
Actually, I embedded that video. It'll be right on the show notes webpage. And, Michael, I can't see the thing.
It's not... If it is a fake, they've mastered the art of subtlety with this one. It really is just a little bit of a blur. But when you watch the slow motion section of it, there is something there when the lightning goes. There's two lightning strikes with a kind of a small horizontal smudge in the middle, and then for the next lightning strike, which is off in the distance a little bit but lights up the area, it's gone. So it is easy to miss even in the slow motion. And the UK version of Yahoo brings us news of a new book entitled The Heretics, Adventures with the Enemies of Science by Will Storr, which explores, quote-unquote, the facts of non-believers, including UFO hunters, Holocaust deniers, and many others, including skeptics. It might prove to be an interesting book, although I'll admit I was a little bit offended to have UFO hunters thrown in with Holocaust deniers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wonder exactly what they mean, the facts of non-believers. What do you...
Well, he's. It seems that the book is an exploration of how certain groups of people, Holocaust deniers being the one I like to use, can ignore facts like, say, the millions of people who witnessed the Holocaust. Speaking of skeptics, I'm sure you've heard the supposition by skeptics that grays are seen simply because they are an image popularized by movies such as Close Encounters and the book covers of like Whitley Strieber and Bud Hopkins. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking lately of an iconic alien image that is recognized worldwide, has been for decades, but doesn't seem to have had any impact on the UFO phenomena. Do you have any guess what that might be?
Was Flash Gordon from another?
I believe
planet?
Flash Gordon was a Yale man.
Okay, let's see. Going way back. E.T.'s too new.
Pre-Roswell.
Pre-Roswell. God. Only thing I can think of is the little green men thing that they used to talk about from Mars. But anyway, go ahead. I'm trying to figure out when Little Green Men actually started as a meme. But I've been thinking of Superman. Probably partially because I just visited Metropolis, Illinois, home of the giant Superman statue. But it struck me that even though he is one of the most recognized aliens ever, followed by Mr. Spock in more recent years, his powers don't seem to be reflected in sightings of aliens. Well, he's accepted because he looks like us, kind of like, well, may I say, Jesus? I mean, he looks like us, and so it doesn't stand apart from what you'd consider an alien, I suppose, except for the powers, as you say.
Well, that's true, but, a lot of the early alien sightings by the contactees saw olive-skinned humanoids, or humans, and the quote-unquote Nordic types that would pass for human, who are blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And this idea of Superman just doesn't seem to have translated. Or even aliens who can shoot heat rays or fly or have super strength or any of those kind of things. And it's just struck me that many of the most popular alien images, another example being the Daleks from Doctor Who. I don't know if you're familiar with Doctor Who.
A little bit.
Passing? Well,
I'm rusty on Who.
The show's celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. So it's been around for quite some time. It's been popular. I think the newest version is shown in 60, 70 countries worldwide now. And they have a recurring villain that has been in it since literally the second story of the show, called the Daleks, who are very non-human looking. And they haven't had an impact. There aren't Dalek sightings, even though, they were so popular in England in the 60s. There were actually two American Doctor Who movies based on the popularity of the Daleks as an alien image. And it just seems to me that this is an argument that really kind of falls apart when you look at the popular alien memes in fiction compared to the reports.
Skeptics don't even consider the fact, talking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that Steven Spielberg used J. Allen Hynek as a consultant for the film. So, who's to say who brought up the gray alien in that to begin with? Right.
Plus, Betty and Barney Hill basically described something very similar, and that was years before.
That's right, yeah. So, poo and you, skeptics.
Great. Now we have our first catchphrase.
That's right. We'll have to use that every time. So, again, we're ramping up. We have a show per week now coming up, and a lot more information. A lot of reason for you to go on our website, which is podcastufo.com. And don't forget, if you're a listener out there and you had a sighting and you want to talk about it, I need just one more person to do next week's show.
I am really looking forward to the opportunity to connect with some of the listeners on the forums.
Great. So again,
I'm using my real name, so you'll know it's me.
So again, the forum is just opened this last weekend, and please feel free to use it. All right, so that's it. Thanks, Michael, and I'll see you next week.
I will see you next week. Have a good show.
Flying saucers are real.
They've seen the aliens buzzing our missile silos.
The UFO phenomenon, either we like it or not, is already very much part of our reality.
That caused a compass needle to spin and spin.
And that's where the whole seed for the idea of underground bases at Dulce was planted.
They had very large eyes, and, I found their stare extremely difficult to bear.
Hi, everyone. This is Martin Willis, and welcome to Podcast UFO for episode number 36. This is one of two with Sam Maranto. Couple of quick announcements. We are ramping up the show. We're going to have a podcast out every single Friday. And also, Michael Lauk is going to be writing more articles. And we have a brand new forum that just went up 2 days ago. So please check that out. It's right on our website. Before we get into the news, I wanted to ask, we're looking for one or two more people that are sighting witnesses that would like to talk about it. This is for our podcast coming up, and please contact me at martin@podcastufo.com. And now we're ready for the news. How you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you this week?
Good.
All right. This week's news includes thoughts on the Russian meteor explosion, an anomalous undersea skull, and more. As always, you can find links to each story in the show notes. By now, everyone has heard of the meteor that broke up over the Ural Mountains in Russia, injuring thousands. According to a Christian Science Monitor article, though, barely half of the Russian public believes this explanation. Alternate theories about the blast include belief that it was caused by a UFO or an American weapon. Included in the article is an interview with the deputy director of a Russian polling agency who mentions only about 25% of Russians believe in UFOs.
I find that almost hard to believe because there's a lot of activity in Russia.
I actually was shocked by that, too, because I've always heard that Russians are more open
Yeah, they
to
believe in
things
anything.
Like
now, I say that kind of jokingly, but my girlfriend of many years is Russian, and her parents still live over there. And just about everyone they know, actually in their neighborhood, they had quite a sighting. It was what you would call, I guess I've heard it called before, a probe. It was like a round washing machine-sized anomaly that just hovered over a parking lot for, it was about 6 hours. Can you believe that?
Really?
The thing just sat there for 6 hours, and they all just watched it. They would watch it and come out and watch it, and it'd still be there. It didn't even move, and then all of a sudden it just took off. Only, I think, one person saw it take off. So UFOs are pretty common in Russia in general. There's a lot of information about that online and some documentaries as well.
Monday, February 25th, saw the launch of 2 nanosatellites containing small telescopes that will be able to study some of the brightest stars as seen from Earth without the interference of the planet's atmosphere. At about 7 kilograms, or 15.5 pounds each, and the size of Nintendo GameCubes, the nanosatellites of the Bright Target Explorer program are not able to take high-resolution images, but can provide valuable support data for the star observation programs.
Wow, that's amazing. I picture my Chihuahua almost weighs that much. Now, did they? So they.
I have had a cat that weighed that much.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could almost toss those things up in the air. Was it just those two things, the purpose of a launch?
Actually, no. It was an Indian launch that put up one large satellite and several smaller ones, the smallest two being these two nanosatellites, but 7 in all.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
The Ocean X team, the group exploring the Baltic anomaly, has released new footage taken with a remote-controlled submersible that appears to show an elongated skull at the investigation site. The Baltic anomaly, for those not familiar, is a strange circular undersea structure in the waters near Sweden, approximately 195 feet wide and 13 feet high. You may remember it was called the quote-unquote undersea Millennium Falcon in many news reports.
That's right. And that really does look like something. I mean, if it was a natural anomaly, it would really be something. It sure looks like some type of craft. And the skull, actually, you can see the sockets in the eyes, what looks like that. That would be a really strange anomaly if that's what it was. Now, I've tried to get Peter Lindbergh from the Ocean X team on the show. I've contacted him a number of times. I was able to get an email address. No response, but I'd sure like to have him on.
Well, maybe they're at sea. Maybe when they get back.
Yeah. Okay. I'll buy that.
A recently posted YouTube video reportedly taken in England on a cell phone appears to show an unidentified object flying in a thunderstorm. It is suggested it may be gathering or generating lightning. We have a link on the show notes so you can view it for yourself.
Actually, I embedded that video. It'll be right on the show notes webpage. And, Michael, I can't see the thing.
It's not. If it is a fake, they've mastered the art of subtlety with this one. It really is just a little bit of a blur. But when you watch the slow motion section of it, there is something there when the lightning goes. There's 2 lightning strikes with a kind of a small horizontal smudge in the middle, and then for the next lightning strike, which is off in the distance a little bit but lights up the area, it's gone. So it is easy to miss even in the slow motion. And the UK version of Yahoo brings us news of a new book entitled The Heretics, Adventures with the Enemies of Science by Will Storr, which explores, quote-unquote, the facts of non-believers, including UFO hunters, Holocaust deniers, and many others, including skeptics. It might prove to be an interesting book, although I'll admit I was a little bit offended to have UFO hunters thrown in with Holocaust deniers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wonder exactly what they mean, the facts of non-believers. What do you...
Well, he's. It seems that the book is an excellent...
The thing about it is I, for the most part, wanted to forget all of that. And it was extremely frightful for me. So whatever transpired, people say, do you have an interest in taking a regression on and seeing if anything, any of the detail? In all honesty, I really don't care. I don't care to know.
Okay.
And so, therefore, I keep it as an interesting story, a possible event that the events did take place. What transpired, I don't know. Are they genuine? I would like to think they are. And again, holding my feet to a higher flame than most people, I would say it's just an interesting aspect that did take place in my life, and I'm willing to at least mention.
Yep. Okay. Now, moving on, let's talk about O'Hare, because I think that's a remarkable case. But one of the first things I think of when that subject comes up is a lot of witnesses did not want to give their names, but now time marches on. I'm sure some of them have changed jobs. Has anyone that you're aware of come forward and actually talked more about that situation?
Well, as far as my own involvement, as you know, I had worked under Dr. Richard Haynes, who is the director of the National Aviation Reporting Center for Aerial Phenomena. And Richard, kept us very well focused on working within certain parameters. And he personally interviewed some 14 individuals. I, on the other hand, only interviewed about 5. Mm-hmm. Not about 5, actually 5. A new person, a new twist to the case came forward just in the last month, where there was an object seen that was not the same object. And again, this comes out afterwards. There isn't any other individuals to corroborate on this. And this is a problem for me, though it has some degree of validity, of course. When people come out later and there's no other witness to add any value or other perspectives or whatever, I have issues with that. And to me, at that point, it's just a very interesting report. Now I'll just have to see if anything else comes out, like you say, later. And you hit a very important piece of information when it comes to UFO cases. Many a time, people will sit still and not say a word within a certain period of time. They wait for the let's say the clouds to roll over, and the people that would be prying and possibly affecting their lives one way or another to stay out of the way, where they're not really under the microscope, or the event isn't front and center in the news anymore. Then they come forward, or if they retire from a position, or a certain posture or perspective in their life has changed. Say, for instance, another sighting or somebody close to them says, "Why don't you come forward?" or eggs them to do it, or some other revelation. But this is a key point, and it doesn't mean that it's not significant or it doesn't hold a value or that they're going to forget. These are those Kodak moments where the crucial aspects of the sighting, the critical information, is still intact, and it will never get lost.
Can you give any details at all of this case that happened about a month ago?
What happened is a gentleman came forward who mentioned that he was actually sitting in a hot tub outside, and of course, this being November the 7th of 2006, it wasn't exactly the most fun weather to be outside in water, but since it was a hot tub, it wasn't too bad. His sighting was somewhere between 2 and 4 o'clock. He doesn't specifically know. The object he's seeing was a very large, almost acorn-looking, brown-ish type craft that was stationary in the sky below cloud cover, and he was correct. We had a ceiling of at about 1,900 feet during that period of time. The weather was very nice. We only had gale winds, I think, of approximately 5 miles an hour, and the weather was temperate. It was decent, and here he is sitting there. He sees this object just sitting there. And he is or at that time was, a employee of at the airport. So of many years too, they had. So he knew air traffic patterns and what things should look like in the sky and what should be and should not be, at least visible from his vantage point, because he'd sit in the tub or look out, and this was something to do on a regular basis. That object sat there for some period of time, then shot directly through the cloud cover, leaving a gaping hole, which is exactly what transpired, as you recall, at gate C-17. And but this was not a disc. It was more of, he says, it looked more like, he used the description of an acorn, but flatter, but an acornish type shape. But I have the drawings. We're going to do another interview, and we'll get some more pictures, and this will be presented eventually, but it's still under investigation.
Very good. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one that saw an object in 2006 in a hot tub. Same thing happened to me 2,000 miles west of there in the spring, actually. So let's talk about Tinley Park. Again, mass sightings are very interesting to me. And can you tell the listener the details about that, please?
Yes. What most people have seen, first of all, when you hear about the Tinley Park case, immediately they think of, if they're into the subject, they think of 2 television shows that premiered it front and center, but we'll go into the details. But I do want to mention them because you could see bits and pieces about it on YouTube, so you could reference some aspect and I could clarify some errors in those shows. The first one being the 10 best UFO encounters, that was NBC Dateline. The other being season 2 of UFO Hunters, Invasion, Illinois. So those were the 2 premier cases or premier showing the case. The UFO Hunters case was front and center. I mean, that was it. The whole show was on that. As far as the 10 best, we were part of 10 cases that they felt were the best photographed cases, even though they had Stevensville and there was no photograph. And then they also had the mass sighting of Phoenix, and the footage they did show was not the footage of what we considered to be the object that was... Right,
that was the flares.
Yes, it was. The Maryland Guard flares, yes. So, Tinley Park footage is this is what adds value to this case. First of all, the case, now we'll give you a little history on the case, Mark. It was the mass sightings that I mainly focused on. There were 3 nights of mass sightings, but the 2 that I give precedence to and credence to would be the August 21st, 2004, and then, of course, the October 31st, the Halloween sighting of that very same year. Now, August the 21st, to give you some idea of what was going on in the world at that period of time. Prior to that, all of about 7 days prior, we had the first landfall, actually 8 days prior, landfall of first in a series of 13 major Category plus, 3+ category storms in the Caribbean. That was Charlie at landfall. Now, soon thereafter, everything started to get very unusual. On the 19th, there was a mass sighting in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and that was an object that was stationary in the sky for, I think it was 6 to 9 hours. And the object, from our calculations, it was somewhere in the range of 600 plus feet as far as the size of this thing. It was a large object sitting up there, and it was seen by tens of thousands of people. That very night, there was an interesting sighting and a very interesting object that was videotaped. And now I've actually found another videotape of the same event, and that was in Arizona. And I know that witness and videographer very well. We've done some research since that time, not just on other sightings there, but I've used them for reference and other materials. So, again, these things transpired prior to the 21st of August, both those scenarios, Minneapolis and the Arizona sighting was on the 19th. Now, again, is there correlation? Is there coincidence? Again, we're at least saying that when I'm working on a case, I like to stay working within the parameters of at least for that case, 72 hours before, 72 hours afterwards. There were other sightings in and around the globe of these 3 illuminations in a isosceles pattern or some variation of that. In other words, just a matter of looking at various perspectives of an isosceles with 3 illuminations, either extended on points or below. And one interesting one actually came from near Kosovo, or near Croatia. And it was a young couple who were on a wooden clipper ship, one of these large ships. In fact, it was the largest vessel of that type, I think, during that period of time. And they were on a midnight cruise or an evening cruise, and they were doing stargazing. The gentleman had laryngitis, strange as it is. He's still out there sick, but he's still out there. So he's looking at the stars, and he sees this configuration coming from the west, moving to the east. very unusual configuration, wide distance between three illuminations, moving in a pattern that they seem to be affixed in some way or form because their motion is really uniform. And it was noted on Peter Davenport's site. In fact, this case came from Peter Davenport, not MUFON. It was from the National UFO Reporting Center, Peter Davenport. And so was this other sighting. Many of the sightings that I'll reference were, during that period of time, were on that site. So this gentleman made a report. In fact, you could see it during this period of time. I think it was on either the 20th, the 21st. And it's a very good read to give you the detail on how articulate this gentleman is in referencing various constellations and where this thing maneuvered through the sky. And supposedly, from what I recall of the report, it may even have been entered into the captain's log. So it was that interesting. So here we are. We had these various things take place prior to it. The day comes, and there were many other more sightings. There was one in British Columbia. There were other ones in New York. There was a very interesting sighting in Iowa, a large triangle seen, physical object was seen over a interstate. There were other reports coming in. There were other sightings of another anomalous objects being flying around too, not just the large triangular object. But getting to Illinois, funny thing is that very same day was the Air and Water Show activity going on in Chicago along the lakefront. So we had some 3 million people out there watching the displays of an assorted military hardware as far as aircraft and various things flying about. So there was a lot of activity in this area. It was also an extremely beautiful night. So people were outside having block parties, barbecues, many different things. The temperature was perfect. We had a clear ceiling. A clear sky. Absolutely nothing obscuring the view. It was beautiful. There was a wind. It varied. And I think the maximum gale in the course of the day was around 12 miles an hour. But there was a constant wind varying at different points from different directions. We had clear weather for 2 days at that point. But we also had another range of activity nearby the Tinley Park area. That was the Midwest Theater, Midwest Outdoor Music Theater. Mm-hmm. And Ozzy Osbourne was playing that night. And, of course, anything unusual coming into town has to stop and see Ozzy, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So we had some witnesses who were stuck on the expressway, I-80, and they were seeing these unusual illuminations also. So the reports started coming in that people were seeing these illuminations to the police department. And we're not talking one or two. It was volumes of calls. In fact, talking to one person who actually worked at dispatch said at one time she had called in because she herself had seen this. And they said that at that point there was no less than 400 calls coming in.
Wow.
So we had volumes of people seeing 3 reddish orange illuminations in the sky that were either moving slowly or hovering. And at times, a few of the witnesses actually seen it move erratically and fast. They would move throughout the area, and it moved, and it was in the area for some length of time, too. It wasn't here just like for a brief moment. The air traffic during this period of time was non-existent. If you know the Chicagoland area, and this, by the way, to give people an idea of where Tinley Park is, it's just south of Chicago. And it is also the most illuminated area south of the Loop. And it is also a location that is abuts to the I-80 corridor.
Mm-hmm.
And I-80 is the largest, interstate running east and west. So you have a lot of traffic. You have a lot of illumination. You also have some very interesting man-made objects that could be seen from 30-some miles up. One being the theater, the outdoor theater that I was actually alluding to. That could be seen for some distance, above. There is a subdivision that this object seemed to be relatively close to for some period of time. That is a series of concentric circles, and it looks like a mini cyclotron. It's really weird. There's a lot of things out there that are interesting from above, if something was interested in something from above. In addition to the fact that we had all these people congregated outside, all these people congregated along the lakefront, and we had military craft flying in and about the community for, some period of time. Because when they're flying in Chicago, they're flying all the way out 20, 30 miles, coming in from various points, having to bank, having to come around. So these objects we're seeing, it's an area that you do have a lot of light pollution. So as far as physical structure, only people who were very close to it were able to see anything more than just the illuminations alone. And these illuminations, the first thing they said, flares on balloon. That was Michael Shermer's explanation.
Yep.
And then the other being Chinese lanterns. Well, first of all, we know what those things look like. We know if we discovered debris. We know the conditions and motion. We also take the footage. We have over 25 identified sets of footage, personally reviewed well over 13. We correlate them. We put them together. We analyze it. And it's been analyzed by multiple groups, not just myself. And this case holds up. These were not flares on balloons or Chinese lanterns. The illuminations, very bright, very large. In fact, on the October 31st sighting, and the footage is available, you can see it on YouTube, you will see a plane. And this plane is flying in front of the object at about 2.5 miles away. And I believe a 7-degree, I forgot the angle now. But if you watch the UFO Hunters episode on this, it was pretty well calculated with the inclinometer and everything. It was relatively close to what we came up with, too, except that they thought the object moving in front of it was a helicopter, which would have been about 40 feet, versus a commercial jet at about 140 or more. So the calculation they came up with, if this was a solid object from point to point, would have been 1,500 feet on one side. Our calculation's closer to 4,000 plus.
Wow. Now, was there any radar?
Funny thing. I requested in 2000 on the October 31st sighting. On the first sighting, I was still weighing the possibility quite heavily of a hoax. So we were looking at that, very seriously, and I didn't request the radar data on that at all. I really should have, and I didn't. So I dropped it on that. On the 31st, on the other hand, and you only have 15 days. People think that, you can just retrieve that any time you want. No, you only have 15 days to get the radar or any voice tower communication. It's 15 days, and that's it. And you pay for it, too. It's not free. So on the 31st, I filed a FOIA. Everything was in on time. No problems whatsoever as far as that goes. I did my follow-ups very diligently a week thereafter, giving them time. Said everything was fine. It was in the work, on and on and on. The end result was that they didn't get it to me. The reason why they didn't get it to me and everything went beyond the 15 days was because it was faxed, because I wanted the data from the Midway Airport, which would be the closest location to get that information. And at the Midway Airport facility, the person who would have been in charge of doing that was out on maternity leave.
Oh, geez.
Well, I just filed another FOIA here not too long ago in another case, and though the person wasn't out on maternity leave, they feel that they had some other problems with it, getting it to the right people. So, it's difficult. And I recall during that period of time talking to somebody down the FAA in Dallas, which ultimately where most of this information has to come from. They said, well, if it is Sam, if it is a real UFO, you are not going to be getting the information.
Wow.
That was somebody working for somebody. So,
Sam, we're almost running out of time. Would you be willing to come back for another session?
Oh, most definitely, anytime.
Okay, because I want to talk to you about so many other things. MUFON, for one, your views on skeptics, and a whole bunch of other subjects. So we'll just move on to one more question, so you'll be back for session 2. Can you explain what the North Lake car incident is?
Yes, the North Lake car incident. Here's another case that came to me from Peter Davenport. He said, Sam, there's this girl that called up and said that something, while she was driving on North Lake Road, pushed her car over sideways into middle lane, and there was nothing there. She just had this thing just push her over. And when she got out of the car, the whole side of the car was damaged. And I'm like, what? He goes, yes, she didn't see anything. And only thing she knew is she heard a sound and the car moved over. When she got out, the whole right side of the car was damaged. So my wife and I went up there to look at the car. We had a hard time, first of all, getting in touch with her. Her mother was very concerned about the scenario, and she lived out of state. So I talked to the mother, got more information as far as when was the best time to call her and her home number, and did get a chance to meet up with her, and we investigated it. So we went out and took pictures of the car. Initially, I thought it was soft body roll, possibly from a deer, because it was near an area that does have a decent deer population, and it was during the time of the rut, so there's always that possibility. She assured me she did not see any deer, there was no animals that she's seen, and looking at it further, I saw absolutely no scratches, no telltale signs of anything that would have given transfer or blood, fur, or anything else. Usually you do see in a soft, an animal or a human head or any soft tissue, a soft item, whether it's a plastic or something like that. You always have to consider that. There was also some construction going on in the area, so I felt, well, maybe there's a possibility of a large roll of insulation that could have fell off and done that, because that, could possibly do it too. Nothing. There was nothing on the road that indicated that would have been the case. The object, however, or the side of the car looked like, if you were to take a beer can, just give you an example, and say suck on cause a vacuum and suck the air out of it and have it collapse on itself. That's what it appeared like. It was very unusual. The other unique thing, and in fact, this was something when the officer showed up, because she was doing 45 miles an hour and whatever it is, approached her on the driver's side and made the mirror actually detach from the car, and it flipped over. There was still the wires, because it was a remote mirror, and it hit the A-pillar of the car, which is really much like a roll cage, and that's your encasement around the windshield, and it would be the driver's side, your left side pillar. And it left an indentation that was at least 1/4 of an inch by 8 inches long. The police officer held it, and he lifted up and he laid it right over it, as she was saying. and was just in shock because the mirror itself didn't have a scratch. It wasn't cracked. But the back of it, the plastic, had been obliterated. And this thing was just shattered like you wouldn't believe. So what would make plastic, which is obviously not as strong as steel, leave this massive indentation in a very structural, strong piece of steel? The only thing to compensate for that, of course, as far as the strength, tensile strength, would be velocity to increase that and to make it actually stronger. And that's what it did. So something very, very powerful made that mirror flip over at a tremendous speed to leave that indentation.
Do you think, first of all, she's believable? And second of all, did she see anything?
No, as far as do I think she's believable? Again, belief is one of those words I absolutely hate. Is she credible? That's another one. It's like these ambiguous terms. I weigh the evidence. So what I do is I take nobody's word for anything. I didn't even take her word for the fact that this event took place at that location. So what I had to do is find something to put that car at that location during that period of time. And I did find the evidence that was a gasket that was specifically from her car, and it was found on the island over there, on the raised island. And I found that I'm running around like an idiot while traffic's going back and forth. It's a miracle I didn't get killed. And, of course, there had to be a news reporter out there, a newspaper reporter, taking pictures of me. It's like he was probably hoping for me to get whacked by the car. It's like, now I got something.
Flying saucers are real.
They've seen the aliens buzzing our missile silos.
The UFO phenomenon, either we like it or not, is already very much part of our reality.
That caused a compass needle to spin and spin.
And that's where the whole seed for the idea of underground bases at Dulce was planted.
They had very large eyes, and I found their stare extremely difficult to bear.
Hi, everyone. This is Martin Willis, and welcome to Podcast UFO for episode number 36. This is one of two with Sam Maranto. Couple of quick announcements. We are ramping up the show. We're going to have a podcast out every single Friday. And also, Michael Lauk is going to be writing more articles. And we have a brand new forum that just went up 2 days ago. So please check that out. It's right on our website. Before we get into the news, I wanted to ask, we're looking for one or two more people that are sighting witnesses that would like to talk about it. This is for our podcast coming up, and please contact me at martin@podcastufo.com. And now we're ready for the news. How you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you this week?
Good.
All right. This week's news includes thoughts on the Russian meteor explosion, an anomalous undersea skull, and more. As always, you can find links to each story in the show notes. By now, everyone has heard of the meteor that broke up over the Ural Mountains in Russia, injuring thousands. According to a Christian Science Monitor article, though, barely half of the Russian public believes this explanation. Alternate theories about the blast include belief that it was caused by a UFO or an American weapon. Included in the article is an interview with the deputy director of a Russian polling agency who mentions only about 25% of Russians believe in UFOs.
I find that almost hard to believe because there's a lot of activity in Russia.
I actually was shocked by that, too, because I've always heard that Russians are more open.
Yeah, they
to
believe in
things
anything.
Like
Now, I say that kind of jokingly, but my girlfriend of many years is Russian, and her parents still live over there. And just about everyone they know, actually in their neighborhood, they had quite a sighting. It was what you would call, I guess I've heard it called before, a probe. It was like a round washing machine-sized anomaly that just hovered over a parking lot it was about 6 hours. Can you believe that?
Really?
The thing just sat there for 6 hours, and they all just watched it. They would watch it and come out and watch it, and it'd still be there. It didn't even move, and then all of a sudden it just took off. Only I think one person saw it take off. So UFO.
Flying saucers are real.
They've seen the aliens buzzing our missile silos.
The UFO phenomenon, either we like it or not, is already very much part of our reality.
That caused a compass needle to spin and spin.
And that's where the whole seed for the idea of underground bases at Dulce was planted.
They had very large eyes, and, I found their stare extremely difficult to bear.
Hi, everyone. This is Martin Willis, and welcome to Podcast UFO for episode number 36. This is one of two with Sam Maranto. Couple of quick announcements. We are ramping up the show. We're going to have a podcast out every single Friday. And also, Michael Lauk is going to be writing more articles. And we have a brand new forum that just went up 2 days ago. So please check that out. It's right on our website. Before we get into the news, I wanted to ask, we're looking for one or two more people that are sighting witnesses that would like to talk about it. This is for our podcast coming up. And please contact me at martin@podcastufo.com. And now we're ready for the news. How you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you this week?
Good.
All right. This week's news includes thoughts on the Russian meteor explosion, an anomalous undersea skull, and more. As always, you can find links to each story in the show notes. By now, everyone has heard of the meteor that broke up over the Ural Mountains in Russia, injuring thousands. According to a Christian Science Monitor article, though, barely half of the Russian public believes this explanation. Alternate theories about the blast include belief that it was caused by a UFO or an American weapon. Included in the article is an interview with the deputy director of a Russian polling agency who mentions only about 25% of Russians believe in UFOs.
I find that almost hard to believe because there's a lot of activity in Russia.
I actually was shocked by that, too, because I've always heard that Russians are more open
Yeah, they
to
believe in
things like
anything.
this.